Planning a fishing trip shouldn't feel like a full-time job. With fishingbooker.com, you can find and book the perfect fishing trip within minutes. Fishingbooker.com connects you with trusted fishing captains around the world. Booking is fast, easy, and secure, with access to verified customer reviews, loyalty rewards, and around-the-clock customer support. Everything you need to book with confidence is in one place. So head to fishingbooker.com and start planning your next fishing adventure today.
All right, welcome back to the Survival and Basic Badass Podcast. Well, today I wanted to talk about psychological experiments. I guess I didn't want to get, I was talking to Kevin and I was like, I don't really want to get too dark, and, you know, it's December and people are thinking happy things and, you know, rainbows and sunshine, and, you know, I want things to be uplifting and positive. So I like that. But man, it turns out governments throughout history, including our own, or the U.S. government, if you're somewhere else, but have been a little shady in the past. And I kind of want to talk about, one, how easily people are manipulated, and two, what our governments are actually willing to do to its people for their own gratification, because people are crazy or whatever it is. And, you know, I'll try and avoid the darkest aspects of it. Just know that their governments throughout history have been pretty willing to be pretty dark. Kevin, you have some disturbing stories. What is our government really willing to do?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to keep up with the Joneses. You know, that was the main thing during the Cold War. There's a lot of like weird stuff that was coming out, and you know, the precursors to the CIA started some projects that were a little bit out there because they thought the Soviets were doing it. It turns out the Soviets weren't really doing it, but you know, they had to get ahead.
Well,
so
don't worry, the Japanese were doing it. I'll help you out with that one in a minute. But
they basically were, they had a bunch of prisoners of war during like the Korea, Vietnam, during, you know, where they thought they were brainwashed, right? They had been, you know, basically tortured and said, you have to say this stuff on camera. And they said that stuff on, that's really how you brainwash somebody, is you torture them until they do what you tell them.
Until they believe it.
Yeah. So the CIA started doing some like weird stuff. And I know we've all heard about MK Ultra and all the weird experiments they did with LSD and different stuff. The CIA backed a Harvard study run by Henry Murray. Basically what they did was they took Harvard students, and they they had like a 3-year running study where they did like mock interrogations, blinding spotlights in people's faces, and
like Abu Ghraib, right?
Yeah, that sort of stuff. Participants, so they had the participants write essays that were like basically outlined their view on life.
That does sound like torture.
Right. Well, it sounds awful. But
it gets worse.
What they did was they had guys then take that essay, read it over, you know, like professional interrogators. And then they would have the person sit in, and they'd pick apart their whole worldview and, like, you know, argue every little point and tell, like, you know, you can't defend something 100%, especially against somebody that has, you know, spent time building up an argument and has your view in front of them. You know, you've written it all down, and just like really fucked up stuff. So one of the participants that later became famous was a 16-year-old, like a boy genius. Skipped 6th grade, 11th grade, went to Harvard at 16.
Promising future.
He was working on a doctorate in mathematics. Really brilliant guy. His name was Ted Kaczynski.
Oh, sure.
And so they ripped his whole worldview apart with this sort of stuff. And over time, later on, turns out he decided to actually make a manifesto. And if you read the Unabomber's manifesto, it's hard to punch holes in it. It's pretty thorough and it's
Because he
pretty
had to
accurate.
be,
And
defensive, right?
what he predicted was going to happen actually did happen. Like we're living in the dystopia that he thought was going to happen. So just to bring that up, Ted Kaczynski did just die recently. I think he had cancer. Yep.
And you know him as the Unabomber.
The Unabomber, right. Right. Another famous guy that was involved in some of these types of experiments. Different experiment altogether, but these
wouldn't drive you crazy enough that you would like tattoo a swastika on your forehead or anything, right?
Well, yeah, maybe. Maybe. So Charlie Manson was also involved in some government-run experimentation. A lot of people don't know this. It's all like just coming to light now, you know? Wasn't previously known. But Manson's parole officer was a guy named Roger Smith. Strangely enough, his parole officer was also had a doctorate from Berkeley, which is weird. He was part of a federally funded program researching LSD and its effects on people. But you can't, I mean, they did, but you can't always just drug random people with LSD. I mean, they did that also. But it's a lot better if you can do that with people that you have control over, like prisoners and things like that. And you could kind of teach them how to manipulate people by manipulating them and giving them LSD. Now, Charlie Manson was in prison a lot. Like he was a bad guy since jump, you know? He was raised in a brothel and he was probably fucked up because his mom was on drugs when she was pregnant. Like he was fucked up when he was born. But it got worse and worse, and they kept letting him out of prison even though he was breaking his parole because they were trying to see the effects with the LSD, and he was one of the main subjects. Turns out he also used LSD to manipulate other people.
Yes.
And his thing was he was trying to start a race war. His idea was to start a race war between black people and white people, and then when the black people all killed off the white people, he could like become their king, you know? That was his main goal. Obviously, he was out of his fucking mind.
Well, there was that.
Jump, but they said that the Charlie Manson murders ended like the hippie movement because it was the hippies that gave him all these crazy ideas, but not the CIA, not the government. You know, people I mean, it's easy to blame stuff on on the hippies and the weirdos and the freaks and the war losers and things like that when really you're the asshole that did it, but whatever. So I mean, the CIA has been fucking with people for a long time and creating monsters, really, you know?
Yeah. So, you had touched on earlier about how, it was kind of a race to who could be the most like disturbing or whatever. And like you said, maybe not everybody was actually participating in the race, but so the Japanese in 1925 were like, they had a guy who was he was the what is the not the attorney general, what's the medical one, the surgeon general. Yeah, he was like a surgeon general of Japan, and he was like, hey, biological and psychological warfare is going to kind of be the future, and we need to get ahead of this because they had just had World War II and the Geneva Convention thing where they said, hey, try not to use mustard gas on people. That's bad. Right. And they were like, this is going to be a thing. They're saying no, but we're all in, right? So they came up with something called Unit 731. Now, it turns out the Japanese loved to screw with the Chinese. And
they hated each other.
The Japanese were actually, at the time, technologically very advanced, which they kind of still are, over the Chinese. And they would just go in and take over towns and be like, hey, what happens if we release the plague here? maybe let's see what happens. And they would throw a bunch of, lice-ridden mice that had the plague and all this stuff. And oh, look, they all died. And then they'd go in these creepy suits and be like, oh, look, we can see all the, I think I didn't put up the pictures, but they had some like pretty scary looking stuff, but they did all kinds of twisted stuff that I really didn't want to get into, but they did underground tunnels and cells. And they say that somewhere between 3,000 and 30,000 people were studied, and 0 of them came out at the end.
Oh, none of them survived.
None of them survived. But, obviously that's a big gap. But that's the thing when you're doing like the secret murder and that kind of thing, you don't really, document it as well as now the Nazis, they documented everything. Right. They were like, let's make movies, let's show what happens. And it's crazy. But yeah. I kind of want to shift it down to kind of the lighter side. So that basically sets the stage for governments are willing to do bad things to their people. They're not exactly above reproach. And I think that's why I feel that it really relates to the whole prepping podcast and stuff is a lot of people like to go through life with the whole, my government's here to take care of me. I'm from the government and I'm here to help. That's kind of the idea, the mindset that a lot of people seem to approach government with. And I feel like that maybe you need to rethink that paradigm. Now, this next section, what I'm thinking is I kind of wanted to talk about how easily we are manipulated and how much that, they can affect our worldview and our outlook and that kind of thing. So there's one study that kind of stood out in the 60s called the Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes experiment. Now, this was actually just a 3rd grade teacher who was like, this is what I want to do. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like a big college funded whatever, but it's one of the big studies that in psychology classes they kind of go back to because it, so it doesn't get too dark, right? It's 3rd grade. How bad could it be? So basically,
I remember 3rd grade. It was awful.
In the 3rd grade, this teacher was like, hey, look, because it was actually the experiment was done the day after Martin Luther King was shot.
Okay.
Or assassinated, I guess we can go with. And she had a class. It was all white kids. And she wanted to explain to them and talk to them about, hey, this is, understand racism and that kind of thing. And how else do you kind of, get there, but human nature, So she says, look, half the kids in the class or a percentage have blue eyes. And then the other kids, they have brown eyes. And I, as the teacher, have blue eyes. So we all know that people with blue eyes are superior to people with brown eyes.
Obviously, though they're results of incest, that's where blue eyes come from, whatever.
Science has shown that people with blue eyes are more intelligent. So we all know that. And obviously, so the people with blue eyes should be the first to go to lunch. And if you're going to want seconds, I don't think the brown-eyed kids get seconds at lunchtime. It's going to be just the blue eyes kids. Well, and and there would be things like this. They actually, only the blue eyes kids could use the water fountain, whereas the brown-eyed kids had to use paper cups in the back, in the back of the classroom. But at first, so this is the whole point of the study is at first they protested and, but once she started throwing in the science says, and, and it basically ended up, the kids went right along and they would treat each other like crap and they would do horrible things to each other. And my point is, governments kind of seem to be creating that whole class system. They do seem to really put a lot of effort into separating us. And I think like as easily as you see that people are manipulated. And I think governments see that. It's very easy for the government to see and manipulate people. And, it's clear and they know about it, right? So, and we've already seen they're willing to do things, hopefully not on such a large scale, but, who knows? There was another study
Yeah.
called the Milgram experiment. This was back in 1963. And they wanted to test the obedience of authority. Milgram's experiment, 1963, Yale. They wanted to see if you guys were paying attention and if you do what you're told. So they basically, it was 3 people. It was the guy in charge, right? The experiment runner. And there was an actor who was told that when he walks in, he's going to be the victim. All right. This is the actor.
Right. He knew ahead of time.
He knew what's going
What
on.
was
He's
happening.
part of the experiment. Right. And then there's a guy who's going to be the teacher.
Right.
Now,
and these were actual teachers that they had.
Right. And they said, look, we need you to, come in and be a part of this study. And they said, look, there's a bunch of pieces of paper written out over on that table. Go pick one up. We'll decide who's going to be the teacher and who's going to be the student. And they're like, all right. So all the papers actually said teacher on it, but the guy picks it up. Oh, I'm going to be the teacher. The other guy picks one up and it says teacher. And he's like, oh, look, I'm going to be the student. So right there's some manipulation going on.
They already know what's up.
Saying, right? So anyway, so the guy goes in a second room and he's the experiment is that they're going to ask him word association questions like spaghetti and dinner, right? Would go together kind of thing, things like that. And they ask him different questions. Now they tell the teacher, look, we're going to see what kind of an effect it would have if you shock the person.
Right. He might learn faster.
If they have that fear, right? They might go along. Now, the way they had it set up, it was going to go up 15 volts every time. Like it was going to get
every time
worse
you
and
get
worse.
an answer wrong.
Now, they actually, dude, it was going to go up to 450 volts. That's pretty significant. I've been nailed with 480 and it freaking hurts.
Yeah.
Like you're like, yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
It's definitely something to wake you up, man.
It wakes you up. So they go through it and they start going. And now the responses are kind of like pre-recorded. It was pretty crazy. So they would ask some questions and, as the guy got them wrong, he'd get a shock.
Right.
And they would actually hear, I don't know what a shocking noise sounds like, but I think it was like a buzzer.
Right.
Like you'd hear like a little buzz vibration kind of thing. And then you would hear the guy scream. So as the experiment's going on, he's like, ow, and the guy would like really, react to it. And he's getting more dramatic. And he's like, all right, look, I just need this to stop. Let me out. Let me out of here.
Experiment's over. I'm done.
I'm done. So the teachers would start to get uncomfortable and be like, all right. And then the guy running the experiment would be like, you know what? Let's just keep going. I think you'll be all right. Let's just keep going. And they would keep going. Well, it turned out that 65% of the people, the teachers, got to the maximum 450 volts and just kept going. And the guy running the experiment was told, you should try and push him at least 4 more times.
Right. So anytime the teacher would object, they had 4 responses. The final response is you have to keep doing this. And if you backed out then the experiment was over.
Right. As soon as you backed out, it was over. And so they asked the people, the teachers, at the end, and they're like, how do you feel about this? Is this going to mess with you psychologically and whatever that you did it? And believe it or not, the answer was, to be honest, I am so glad I was a part of this experiment because I realized like how much
Right.
I'm willing to do, like how messed up I am,
Mm-hmm.
but again, they repeated the experiment over and over again because they couldn't believe the results. And it was consistent between 61 and
Yeah, it turns out a
65%.
lot of people, when an authority tells a figure tells them to do something that they don't feel comfortable doing, well, they'll just do it.
Yeah. No, it's bad. There was another one, Harlow's Monkeys. They wanted to prove whether we just like our mom or whatever because she gives us food, or do we like her
Yeah,
because
even though this one
she's
was
like
just
a good
monkeys,
person?
it felt kind of fucked up.
It was fucked up. So basically what happened is they set up two mother figures, and one was just made out of wire and wood,
Yeah, it was shaped like a monkey, but it was just
shaped like
wire
a
mesh
monkey, but it
and
was wire and
yeah,
wood. Like it wasn't even like nice at all.
but it had
Eh, eh,
bottles, right?
right. And then the other one was made out of like terry cloth, and it was soft and it was whatever, but still not a real monkey, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And both could provide milk, and they were trying to prove like whether you want something nurturing or something not. And the idea would be that you go into to who do you go for comfort. And to be honest though, as the experiment went on, whenever they would scare the monkeys or do anything, they would always go to the soft nice one
Mm-hmm.
for comfort. And it showed that there's kind of more to your love than just the hand that feeds me. But again, it's the hand that feeds me and gives me softness.
Yeah, the wire wood monkey was the only one that had food. The terry cloth one, they took the food away from it. So it would always go to the wire monkey to get the food, the wire mom, but it would always go when it was scared, it would always go to the softer monkey. And yeah, I mean it goes to show that like, you can raise somebody in isolation, they're gonna end up fucked up. We're like we're family oriented animals, So you kind of have to give your kids a little bit of attention. It turns out you can't just beat the shit out of them and keep them locked in the room all the time.
Yeah, the disturbing comments. See, this is the kind of audience that we have that I have to worry about. That's the whole problem.
All right, let's talk about the Stanford prison experiment for a minute.
All right, what happened?
All right, so Stanford, 1971, 24 middle-class university students were selected to take part in a simulated jail environment to examine the effects of social setting and social roles in individual psychology and behavior. Basically, they took 12 of the 24 students and made them guards randomly. 12 students were the prisoners. It was supposed to last 2 weeks. People got fucking crazy though, real quick. Things went downhill real fast.
And that's what's so weird is how quickly we turn, and become a little more disturbing.
Yeah, 6 days is all it lasted before things they had to stop it, because I guess they said 2/3, that would have been 9 of the 12 people became like sociopaths, more or less, like sadists. They enjoyed inflicting pain, and they were doing things just to be fucked up, just to be nasty, and it got worse and worse real fast. But it goes to show, like, all those Nazis that said, "Oh, I was only following orders. I was only doing what I was told to." You're doing really fucked up stuff to people, but somebody told me to do it, so.
Right. That's kind of, one of the things at the end of the Milgram experiment was they said, look, why did you keep doing it? Well, because you told me to. And the guy who, the experimenter is like, yeah, but you did it. Like you made the choice.
Right.
And people kind of, had that realization. It's not that they were completely, but they went along with it.
Right.
And that's, I think, came to light after the whole Nazi thing. A lot of the guys kind of realized, like, yeah, I did do it. But when you're in that group and going along, the big thing was they there was a Bobo the doll experiment, and it
Mm-hmm.
kind of this really tracks with what you're saying. And they had just this blow up doll that kids had as a as a toy.
Right.
It
Little
was like
clown.
a clown, that was just like looked like a big bowling ball, and it was air, and you'd punch it. Well, so the experiment was they would show the kids a video, like a cartoon kind of thing that they set up, that would have kids treating Bobo with respect and affection.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would show them videos of kids just brutal beating it up and being insane on it. And they would watch the video a couple of times. And then afterward, they'd put the kids in the room with the doll. And
Mm-hmm.
sure enough, the ones that were told to kind of revere it, or taught
Right.
to
Taught.
revere it,
Love it and
would
take care of it. Right.
would love it and take care of it. But the ones who were shown the brutality were right away, that's normal and that's what we do. And it just, I think it just kind of makes so clear how easily we can be manipulated or taught or pushed into something. And that's the thing, when you have social media and puts you in this like feedback loop of, well, you go down this dark road a little bit, well, people who like that like all this crazy stuff, and then it just escalates and builds. Like you're a big horror movie fan guy,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Right? You
What is that
are
supposed to say? Something bad about me? Like,
I'm just
think
saying,
I'm a serial
I
killer
just
or something?
this was all leading up to that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a nice guy. I'm watching the Hallmark Channel.
Mm-hmm.
And you're, over there watching Freddy Krueger
Yeah.
or
That's why
whatever.
Chuck is so kind and affectionate. Yeah.
Because you guys look at me and you're like, Chuck, rainbows and sunshine.
Uh-huh.
Kevin, he's hardcore and rage.
Yeah. But that kind of goes along with confirmation bias. That's another one of the social, studies
Sure.
that have been done. And basically cognitive bias, confirmation bias, it's tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation of one's existing beliefs or theories. So basically, if you're Republican conservative, you're gonna watch Fox News, and if you're liberal, you might watch MSNBC. But either way, you're gonna take information that you receive, and you're gonna interpret it to back up your beliefs. If you're racist and you see a black person doing something awful, you'd be like, "Oh, that tracks.
That's
that
what black
figures."
people do.
If you're not racist, you might think, "Oh, that person probably had a fucked up childhood." I'd see fucked up white people too. But
Sure.
you that doesn't stick in your memory the same way. If you're a racist person, you already
You're
have these
predisposed,
assumptions, right? And you're gonna use things to back it up. But I think that in the United States, the Second Amendment or the First Amendment has really done a good job kind of keeping government manipulation down to a dull roar. But if you go to some other countries, like, they have state-sponsored media. The media is run by the government. So the government tells you what information they want you to know. It doesn't have to be true. It doesn't have to be anything. It can just be whatever they want you to know. There are buildings in a lot of the buildings in North Korea have radios playing state-sponsored propaganda 24 hours a day. Like, if you're living in one of these things, it's 24 hours a day. You're listening to, the North Koreans pumping you full of information. At a certain point, that's all you know. It's all you understand. And that's the way you view the world.
Right. Well, that's actually that, I was kind of done with my studies, but I got one more that kind of tracks with that. Is in 1995, they had a bunch of kids come in, and they got the parents together, and they had the parents tell childhood stories of their kids, like, they went to camp and they did this, and they had a friend, Johnny, and whatever. And they would spend an afternoon with the young people, the experimenters, and they'd say, "Hey, remember that time when you went to camp with Johnny, and, and oh yeah, you rode the boat and whatever, and it was great." And they'd be like, oh yeah, and they'd remember all these stories. Well, then they'd slip in some like event that never happened, right? They'd be like, oh, but remember that one time you went to that wedding and you like knocked over the whole wedding cake and everyone was like, oh my God. And they were like, no, I don't remember that. That didn't happen. And they would say, no, no. But then they'd bring them back the next day after they slept on it. And the next day they'd be like, well, tell me about that wedding cake event again. How did that happen? Oh, well, I remember it was my friend Bobby's parents were getting remarried. And when they got at the wedding and I went over and I was like dancing by the table and I fell and I knocked over the cake and like they had all kinds of details.
Right. And they'd fill in the details for all these things. They'd come up
and
with
they
their
would
own
have
stuff they
like
weren't
very
even told.
Specific.
Yeah.
And just, right in. But whereas right away they didn't do it. So, but I guess the point is we really are, very easily conditioned or manipulated. It's funny. I actually told my kids, it was funny kind of right around, it was somewhere around when like Hillary was running around and was like anti-gay marriage and Obama was against gay marriage, when they had that election. Like right now it's hard to believe, people were like that, and whatever. But I was like, you need to decide what your values are and write them down and why you believe them. And it's okay that you change your mind in the future. Everybody hates the Jews and we put them in camps and it's great and whatever. And then later, you don't, just because that's your value now doesn't mean you can't change and go, you know what, maybe that was a bad idea. That's okay. Right. It's okay to change your mind. Just know what you believe and how you're being manipulated and how things change. And that's all I'm saying. Because, I'm always paranoid and maybe I'm a jerk and a horrible person and history will judge me later. Well, we already know that, right? I mean, agreed. I see Kevin's nodding his head right now going, yep. I saw that. But the idea is we've seen that like, so people are like, oh, well, the whole transgender thing, they're just doing their thing and whatever. And it's none of your business. And then, but I'm like, and used to get these t-shirts at the colleges. One of my college kids has a t-shirt that says, love is love. And that used to be like the man boy love, or slogan. Right. Like that was their thing, was like, you can't, deny who you, love. And now there's already hints in some of the more crazy left-leaning parts of the country of, well, people who love kids. I mean, how can you deny what's right or wrong? Just because it's right for you doesn't mean it's
right.
And you go down this road until you get so
right. And you can get in with crazy
where you
people.
Were.
Yeah. And you just, yes. And,
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Exactly. I do that too. But also, and you get to the point where you're out of your fucking mind and everybody around you is agreeing with you and thinks you're the greatest person. You're so progressive. You're so progressive.
And that's
because there's some people that are just born gay. Some people are also born wanting to fuck kids. So that's not, so there's nothing wrong with that. That's okay. But I
need to put a disclaimer at the beginning of this episode that maybe if you're thinking rainbows and sunshine, this isn't the episode.
Yeah, why are we doing this podcast today?
Kevin,
ruining the Christmas spirit.
Ruining the Christmas spirit. You're like the Grinch. No, but that's kind of the whole thing. It's just the whole mindset of people does shift with time. And we're very easily swayed one way or another and into different things. And it's really important that you know your values. People talk about, sticking to your cores, whether that's, religion and reading the Bible or whatever, but your actual beliefs, know what you stand for. Be firm in your beliefs and what you care about and what you're willing to do. Because, I hate to say it. I mean, the reason I guess that I pushed on with doing this episode was that, so many people are like, well, I would never do these things. so often people are like, look, I would never do these things. I'll never go down that road. And then as society, and events change, we move right into these, different darker places.
Yeah.
And it's so important that you hold fast to what's right and what's true. And also don't get duped yourself. There's a dangerous road that this country's going.
I remember about 20 years ago, in Dallas, they were putting up CCTV TV cameras, and they were putting them up just like filming public areas, and people were outraged. Like the police were going to use this as evidence of crimes and things like that. People were outraged. But if you don't have anything, if you're not committing any crimes, you don't have anything to worry about. That's always the argument, right? And, people were very upset. Like, we're moving in on 1984. Now, 20 years later, you'd be shocked to be out in public and not be recorded by something or someone. You know what I mean? If you go into a gas station, they're recording you. If you go into any kind of store, you're on camera and they're recording you. If you go in they're using
and we're
facial
like,
recognition.
Thank God there's cameras here. I feel safer.
Yeah, they're using facial recognition in Home Depot's, Lowe's, and Walmart to track your shopping history so that they can advertise directly to you more accurately to make you buy more shit. And
it gets even crazier.
Fine.
Walmart's so slick, and honestly, I don't think you should be stealing from stores and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So, I am not as horribly offended. But if you want to know how much you're being manipulated and tracked, Walmart is tracking the minor shoplifting so they can connect them all together and with facial recognition, so they can add it up to a felony.
Right.
And then when you hit the felony level,
then they
grab you. And then they're like, yep, we got one, book them and the whole thing. And that's, Uncle Whiskey likes shop naked.
Yeah,
we all have our dreams.
That makes sense. I mean, I don't know what to say about that. I was going to say some awful stuff. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Evan, this is the point. People listen to this podcast and then their moral, compass goes down and down and down.
Right. We're ruining you for everything.
Sliding scale.
Yeah. Luckily, I feel that the people
there's problems.
Luckily, I feel that the people that listen to this podcast are already fucked up, so it's not that big of a deal.
Raising the bar instead of lowering it. That's it. After getting out of the military, I'm like, well, the bar's pretty low, and I'm raising it up.
Right. What are you going to do?
Hey, how many times have I heard, can you just try one sentence without using the word fuck? And I'm like, listen here, motherfucker. I will fucking tell you that there's no fucking way that's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, teach their own. So Merry Christmas with that.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
remember, peace on earth, love your fellow man.
Exactly. You guys are wondering what, what you might want for Christmas. Maybe what you want to get your significant other. Maybe you need to head over to preppingbadass.com and check out the gear section and see that new gear for your special someone who loves the podcast and maybe needs some new exciting stuff. I'm just saying, something you might want to look into. Maybe you want to support the podcast and get cool stuff like a badass coffee mug or a cool sweatshirt, cool t-shirt. I think t-shirt or mug. I don't think we have sweatshirts by going to Patreon. But if you go to Patreon, we have cool stuff. I would also say you have questions, concerns, show ideas, things you want to hear about. You can email us at preppingbadass@gmail.com. Otherwise, stay safe. Talk to you guys next week.
Planning a fishing trip shouldn't feel like a full-time job. With FishingBooker.com, you can find and book the perfect fishing trip within minutes. FishingBooker.com connects you with trusted fishing captains around the world. Booking is fast, easy, and secure, with access to verified customer reviews, loyalty rewards, and around-the-clock customer support. Everything you need to book with confidence is in one place. So head to FishingBooker.com and start planning your next fishing adventure today.